In a world gone mad, only two voices of sanity remain. Affinio and BuzzSumo are all that are left of the corporate overlords that control the food supply. Humanity's only hope lies with the world's most entertaining business podcast. And two nomads, Mark Schaefer and Tom Webster, are pitched in a battle to the death. Will common sense and humor prevail, or will humanity be overwhelmed? Only the marketing companion can find a way. Coming this fall.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Companion. This is Mark Schaefer broadcasting to you high atop our landmark studios here at Rockefeller Center in New York with my co-host, the willowy and humid Tom Webster. What's so funny?
That,
we just got started, man.
I'll tell you, I've gotten a lot of introductions in my life, and that's one of them. Wow. Willowy and humid.
Well,
okay.
I'm trying to stand out.
I'm going to try and live down to that.
Well, so before we get started, and we have got a really, really interesting show today. I think it's even going to be a bit of a controversial show. Certainly it's a topic I'm conflicted about around certain new aspects of content strategy that are being debated around the web. I do want to give a shout out to a guy in my class at Rutgers. I literally just walked out of class a few minutes ago. I'm up in New Brunswick today. And I got the nicest compliment, Tom. One of the students, I asked him, well, how did you pick this program? How did you choose to get your graduate education through this program at Rutgers? He said, I listened to your podcast.
Really?
He said it was really important to me to not just look at the curriculum, but look at the teachers and to find people who I really could learn something from. So just wanted to give a shout out to Sean, who is a fan of our podcast and now one of my students. So I think that's pretty cool. You know, you never know when you create content how you're going to impact people and what some of the qualitative benefits are that don't show up on Google Analytics. But that was one of them. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, I guess I'm conflicted by that. On the one hand, that's wonderful. Welcome to the fold, Sean. But, you know, I feel bad because what he doesn't know is I'm actually the brains behind the podcast. And
I think he has a very accurate view of the world, Tom.
You think so? Yeah,
I do. Yeah, and
I'm not teaching that class, so he's
also,
actually not benefiting from it.
I also think, you know, it's cool because I get comments like this once in a while. I'm beginning to believe maybe we have more than a few listeners.
You know, we might. I was actually at Content Marketing World in Cleveland last week, and had a number of people come up to me saying, "I love your podcast." A shout out to John Burkhart, who I met for the first time. Also,
what a sweet guy!
A really, really sweet guy, and he is a big fan of the podcast. So talked about that for a while. But yeah, I had a number of people come up and say they were listeners to the podcast. So I think based on my hard analytical anecdotal data, we have probably 5 listeners or maybe 6.
Based on who came up to you.
Based on who came up to me, yeah. I mean, I don't have anything else to go.
Well, then there was Sean at Rutgers today, so that makes 7.
Makes 7, yeah. So we are approaching double digits. So
7 we can confirm.
For all of you out there,
we have 7
that
confirmed.
We can count on 2 hands.
7 confirmed cases.
7 confirmed cases of the Marketing Companion.
So Did you come away from Cleveland inspired and energized?
I did, and you know what I came away from most inspired by?
Do tell.
Was really the power of an event, and that really got me inspired to kickstart the planning, the early planning for Companion Storm 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Oh well, we never had Companion Storm 1
that you know of.
I'd hate to think that we had a podcast-based event and I wasn't invited.
Well, I didn't think you could make it, and I didn't want to make you feel bad. But we're well into planning Companion Storm 2.
Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo.
Well, I'm up for that. And
Are you?
Here's the funny thing. We introduced this idea of having a conference based on, just invite people that love the podcast and
Yeah.
hang out. And we had if you remember, we had the location identified. We were going to do it at that Denny's.
At that Denny's, yeah, great Denny's.
On Highway 19 in Knoxville, and had that whole thing arranged. We were going to have free pancakes.
Yep.
And basically, so I mean, some of the planning has been done. We just never executed. So why are you thinking now that we should do this?
Well, I came away from Content Marketing World with a lot of great ideas, and kind of energized to create some content and really try and up my game. And I think our listeners would benefit from that as well. And that's the kind of thing that the podcast helps, blog posts help. But only actually, I think, really getting together face to face can give you the power of what we're all about, and really what this whole movement is about. The whole companion movement.
We're a movement now.
We're a movement now, yeah. And honestly, we've been moving fairly irregularly, truth be told. But I think it's time for us to move regularly.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because
do an event.
Last time we talked about this, I mean, there were a number of people that took it seriously and said, "Hey, when are you having this thing?
Yeah,
let's do it." So, one of the things we learned from Content Marketing World was the importance of having a very relevant and tuned in keynote speaker, because when you do think of content marketing, the first name that comes to mind is Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill.
Yeah. So, I mean, I learned something there. So, I think, Tom, one of the things we really need to do is think about who would really kick this thing off for us. And the first name that comes to mind for me is probably Kanye West.
Kanye West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing says marketing companion like Kanye West.
I looked into that.
Really? That's pretty fast because I just came up with it.
Yeah, well, I pinged him on Instagram. And he's willing to do it. Okay. He's willing to do it.
Yeah.
He has a few rider items in his contract. Mm-hmm. One of them is $1 million.
Done.
So that part, I think, is easy.
No big deal.
But he had some dietary requirements that I think we need to talk about offline. I mean, the money part's easy because we'll just use some of the proceeds from our wonderful sponsors here at the Marketing Companion, like BuzzSumo and Affinio.
Yeah.
We can easily cover that.
Did you see that video he made with all the naked people?
I can't look at those things, Mark, my eyes.
No, I saw it.
Did you?
Yeah, and it really confirmed for me this is the guy we want.
This is the guy we want. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He had a naked Donald Trump in his video, so I'm thinking, hey, let's do something like that.
Well, so here's the other thing that I have planned for Companion Storm 2. Mm-hmm. Is one of the great things about a conference, and I'm sure you've seen this as well as I have, that so much value happens between the sessions. The networking in the hallways, the networking in the expo hall. Mm-hmm. So what we've planned on with Companion Storm is to have no sessions.
Just Kanye. You, and Kanye.
Yeah. So right now the plan is Kanye 9 to 9:30, networking 9:30 to noon.
Close optional.
And then a carving station.
Yeah.
Carving station, ice cream bar. And then networking from 1 to 5. And then at 5...
Close optional.
At 5, there'll be the closing keynote, which I think should be you.
Oh, well, thanks for involving me this time.
Yeah. And that's 5 to 5:02, and then drinks will be from 5:02 to 7. And I think that's a pretty solid agenda.
Yeah. Well, they don't serve alcohol at Denny's.
Well, then we can't have it at Denny's because I can't listen to you without. Well, you know what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, look, I think we're off to a good start.
Absolutely.
And,
Companion Storm 2.
Electric Boogaloo. Hey, and look, we're open to your ideas here as we plan Companion Storm 2. I guess it's 2. Yeah. It's the second time we had the same idea, anyway.
Yep.
So let's
Good
kick
enough.
off our topic, and it's time, Tom, to get serious.
It's a serious show for serious people. Yep.
And our serious topic today has to do with a scintillating, thought-provoking, and amazingly written blog post by Steve Rayson, who is the founder of BuzzSumo, who is one of our sponsors. And it's in addition to being one of our sponsors. I mean, Steve is just turning out amazing content. He is a great thinker, and this particular piece of content lit the internet on fire. There's
Sure did.
commentary about this all over the web, and when I read this post, I immediately thought, "Wow! I mean, this is a discussion topic." Because, and I'll let you kind of summarize it, Tom. But I'll just say, when I read this, my first read of this thing, I literally felt sick to my stomach.
Hmm.
And there's not too many times I read a blog post about content marketing that really creates an emotion that strong.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, it's you can't really argue with some of the things he's saying. So why don't you kind of kick it off and summarize this post? We'll have a link to this, of course, in the show notes on the blog post.
Marvelous, thought-provoking post. And yes, they are a sponsor, but this post has kind of lit up the internet. A lot of people have been talking about it. It's very provocative. It's compelling because it's incredibly research-based. And I think if you could sum it up, it's kind of an answer to that age-old quality versus quantity dilemma that content marketers go through. And though, ironically, this post is clearly an example of quality. It is a very long pillar post with a lot of research involved. Basically, his conclusion is quantity.
Yeah, I think the title, I don't have it in front of me here, which is ironic since we're talking about it. I think the title of the post is "The Future is More Content."
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the points that it makes is that, based on the research that Steve did, is that quantity essentially wins here, and that as we move forward into an era where there are going to be more and more bots developing that content.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about, a sports article.
Yeah.
The average sports article. I'm going to make some sports writers wrong here, but if you're a sports writer listening, you don't write average sports articles. You're wonderful. But the average sports article could probably be written by a bot. You pull out the highlights. I'm in a fantasy baseball league, and a bot writes our weekly summary every week. Mm-hmm. It writes what the highlights were for my team, what the low points were, and it's essentially written by a robot. That's the only way you could write that kind of 5 or 6 paragraph piece of content for 1 million fantasy baseball leagues. And a bot can do that. And we should expect to see more and more of that. We should expect to see that get better and better. And there's some very compelling arguments in this post that make the case for more is better than quality.
Well, yeah, so let's get into some of the specifics. And Steve begins to construct his argument that more quantity, not just more quantity, but much more quantity,
much more. Yeah.
will win the day over quality by, first of all, pointing to some statistics he got from the Washington Post and what's been happening there since Jeff Bezos of Amazon bought that iconic publication. And he shows how the Post is now publishing 1,200 pieces of content a day, and in that same period the visits have grown by 28%. And one of the key arguments Steve makes is, let's say you're creating 5 blog posts a month that get 1,000 views. So each blog post averages 200 views, which you might think is pretty good. So you write 5 pillar posts and you get 1,000 views. What Steve is saying is that, well, you could make a business case that you could create 10,000 short, almost useless pieces of content and get 20,000 views or 50,000 views. And so why wouldn't we do that? If the goal is to drive more traffic to our sites, and there's a pretty compelling case to say more content is going to drive more views, why wouldn't we just do that? And the other important point he makes is he said, I couldn't have made this argument a few years ago because the cost of creating content was so high. So the return on investment of creating that much content wouldn't justify these additional views. But what he said, and Steve and I had an exchange offline about this, and he provided some information to me that's not in the blog post that's pretty interesting. There are now companies out there, as you mentioned, are creating robotic content. This is something I've been writing about, and we've discussed before that, this is coming. Well, it's here. Steve got a quote that said, from a company in Chicago, that said they could take BuzzSumo data and create 1,000 blog posts a month for $250.
Wow.
Now, so before you jump all over Steve, you got to look at the whole picture here. And I think one of the things we need to explore today, Tom, is this idea of what's the business case? What are you trying to do before you adopt, a strategy like this? But a lot of people on the web are jumping all over Steve, and they're saying, no, you've got to create quality. Quality is always going to win, and quality is always going to rise to the top. You really need to put your emotions aside, as I had to do, because believe me, when I read this, I just thought, oh no, don't go there. But Steve makes an economic case. And I think that if you look at this only in the view of economics, that the cost of producing content is approaching zero. Here we have this example, $250 for 1,000 stories, and that price is going to be going down over time. That some businesses will certainly be looking at this as a viable strategy.
Yes, and I think Steve makes a case that is correct here, that quantity in this case, what it is robotically assisted, and you can just absolutely flood the market, you're going to win at some very key metrics. And one of the metrics that he spends a lot of time in here is shares. And I think you and I should talk about that a little bit. But one thing that is pretty clear is that if you can make money by increasing shares, then quantity is the game. If you can make money by having more eyeballs look at your content and having those eyeballs share your content with other eyeballs, and I hope there are bodies attached to those eyeballs, it's kind of gruesome, then Steve is absolutely right. If you're in the eyeball game, if you're in the serving ads to make money game, which the Washington Post is,
that's exactly right.
He's not wrong.
Yeah. So basically he's saying game the system.
Yeah, game the system. And he's laid out a pretty compelling case for that. So that's, again, if you're in the eyeballs game, he's not wrong.
Now, the other thing that is provocative about this, and I'm taking the argument another step here, is one of the things I've written about this content shock idea is that in reality, the most effective content marketing strategy is to create content shock for your competitors. And what I mean by that is you find some subject niche, some topical niche or an industry category that's underserved, maybe underrepresented by content, and then you swarm, you dominate. You put so much content into that niche that the Google juice flows to you. It's very difficult for anybody else to catch up. And we see examples of this. Some of the most popular and successful content marketers out there, that's the strategy. It's not rocket science. You're basically trying to create content shock for your competitors. Now think about this. Not only will these bots be able to create content and swarm content, presumably they would also be able to determine what are the underserved niches.
Mm-hmm.
You could almost automate the whole darn thing. You could almost automate finding the niche, creating the content, performing the analytics, even making the recommendations and executing on promotion and advertising. It's amazing to think about that that content marketing is almost moving towards some sort of formulaic thing that you'd see on Wall Street, like buy and sell. I mean, I don't think we're too far away from that.
No, but I think before we make this leap.
No, I've already made it.
You've already made it. All right. Then I'm going to leave you behind, or I'm going to wave goodbye to you as you jump across this chasm. Mm-hmm. First of all, in order to make this leap, you need to know exactly what the economic value of a share is for you, because there is a cost to this. Mm-hmm. And this cost is not being measured quantitatively. And this is is this a soapbox I want to get on, especially after being at Content Marketing World last week, which was a fantastic show, by the way. Joe Polizzi and team deserve kudos for putting on a really great event. But content marketers right now are in love, are infatuated with quantitative data. And this article, plays to that as well. And again, is quantitative data is not wrong. But there is another level here. Yes. And that level is not being explored. And the amount to which content marketers are in love with quantitative data is blinding them to a few things.
Yes, I agree.
And in my business, I deal with both quantitative and qualitative data. Mm-hmm. And here's what this blinds you to. So first of all, again, if you're in the business of eyeballs, increasing shares makes economic sense for you. Mm-hmm. But here's what you need to know. There are companies out there that flood their niches with content. They flood them with content. Mm-hmm. And you read that, and I'm not going to name any names here, obviously, but you read that content, and that content is not very good. That content is disposable content. Mm-hmm. It's 20 great ways to write 10 lists of 15. Mm-hmm. And here's what metrics are not telling you. Their shares may be going up. Their hits may be going up. But my opinion about the company is going down. My opinion about the people that work at that company mm-hmm. and the amount of thought that they put into what they do is eroded. Mm-hmm. And if you are in the business not of eyeballs and not of shares, but of converting someone to the belief that you can help solve their problems, you're doing damage. And that damage is not going to be ever calculated by web metrics, because your web metrics could go up. And it could go up with precisely the universe of people who will never buy your services. And it could be going down with the people who might in fact have the problem that your product or solution solves. And you won't know it because your web metrics and your Google Analytics are blinding you to that problem.
Well, and that's it's a great point, and you're not leaving me behind at all, because I mean
But I want to.
Well, I know, but I'm not going to let you. And because I mean that was the point I was going to get to, that we have to be careful. That look, Steve is right. He is right, and as distasteful as this may seem, to have a strategy of flooding the world with content, it can make economic sense in some cases. But I emphasize some cases. And one of the exchanges I had with Steve was, look, man, because he concludes the article, well, I always thought writing these smart things was going to be my best strategy, but maybe I'm wrong. And my point to Steve was, I love his writing. And by the way, I'll put a note in here for our other sponsor, Affinio, as well. I mean, we're so fortunate that both of our sponsors are turning out amazing content. If you haven't checked out the Affinio blog, be sure to do that too. I mean, it is truly a best practice as far as looking at how to apply content marketing to show how your product works in an entertaining and an interesting and educational way. But I went to Steve and I went back to him. I challenged him. I said, man, I love your content, but you know what? If you start pumping out 100 posts a week, I'm going to be the first one to leave because I don't want to see 100 posts in my RSS feed from you. I want to see one. I want to see you because Steve Rayson of BuzzSumo is the thought leader I admire here. And my content output is modest compared to most organizations out there. I mean, I put out 4 blog posts a week, which is a fraction of what most businesses in the space are doing. And let me tell you something, Tom. When people unsubscribe from my blog, the number one reason is too many updates.
Yeah.
If not only am I not going to do 100 posts a week, I'm not going to do 5. I used to do 5, and when I took it back to 4, my unsubscribe rate dropped by 80%. So if I went into this flood the world with content strategy, I would lose many of the people who matter. So I think, before we just look at this and go crazy over it, and Steve articulates this too. I mean, he does a very fine job of being careful to look at what is your strategy, what is your goal. But if you look at a guy like Avinash Kaushik of Google, he is undoubtedly a thought leader in this space. He publishes approximately 1 post a month.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all he needs to do. And he creates a post that's almost like a little book. It's so thorough. It's so comprehensive. And so you have to look at your goal. If you're trying to establish yourself as a thought leader, gain trust, gain awareness that leads to loyalty, then flooding the world with content ain't going to do it.
No, and I want to bring up something here that actually Joe Polizzi said at Content Marketing World, and I rolled it around my head a bit, and I think I get it. And he said it in his opening keynote address that you either should go all in on content marketing or don't do it at all. And on the surface, that sounds like a kind of a trite aphorism. That's a nice thing to say. But I think what he's actually saying here is that the danger of not going all in is that you create content that either doesn't do anything or hurts you, and you're expending resources to do it. You might as well just not expend those resources. So what does going all in mean? I submit there are 2 ways to go all in. Going all in is either to outdo the Washington Post, or at least outdo your competitors in terms of quantity. And look, and Steve nails it. Yeah. Like, if that's going to work for you, if your competitors are putting out 20 pieces of quality content a month, you put out 200 pieces of content a month, and that's the key. Mm-hmm. That's one way to go all in. The other way to go all in, find yourself your own Avinash.
Yeah. Or
find yourself a legitimate thought leader.
Yeah, I mean, be the Avinash.
Be the Avinash. You have to be the Avinash, and so you can't just be
or be the Mark Schaefer, as we like to say,
or be the Avinash.
All right,
you actually have to be a thought leader. You can't. Yeah, I mean, you can't just sort of act like the thought leader.
No, I am a thought leader because that's what it says on my LinkedIn profile.
That is, well, I know I haven't been to your LinkedIn profile in a while, but
you need to check it out.
I'll do that right after this podcast.
It's a thing of wonder.
I promise you. I will.
Well, here's the thing that I like about this subject. First of all, it kind of it articulates the dirty little secret of content marketing that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, and that, you know what, there is a legitimate strategy that's not based on quality.
Yeah.
That you can flood a market with crap and still win. Now, is that Joe's definition of being all in? I think if you're honest about possible strategies, yes, that is a possible strategy. It's not necessarily about quality. It can be about quality. In my case, in your case, in the case of Avinash, it is about quality because I care about what people think about me. I will never, ever, ever post something that lets somebody down, that isn't something I am 100% proud of, that I think is unique and contributes to the conversation in some way. So I do like this idea. I think Steve took a gutsy position, probably an unpopular position, but it also, he had some other things in there that suggests what is the strategy in this world where we're being overwhelmed with content. He had this amazing statistic in there that showed the number of pages indexed by Google grew from 1 trillion to 30 trillion.
Wow.
In 7 years. I can't even imagine a trillion of anything. And, it's grown by 30-fold in 7 years. And you know what? That is the tip of the iceberg. Budgets are increasing. Output is increasing. And once we start getting into automated content, come on. I think 2 things occur to me. Well, number 1, we talked about be a thought leader. Focus on quality. 2 other things occur to me in this environment, and one is the importance of your brand. How do you stand out in this world of overwhelming information density? And you look at someone like Steve, BuzzSumo, our friends at Affinio. They have brands that you trust, and you're going to trust their content no matter how much the world is flooded. The other idea, I think, is the importance of curation in our future. Is there's going to be a lot of people that are overwhelmed and confused, and if you can make sense from this flood of content and curate it in a smart way, like Scott Monty does with his Fine newsletter. I mean, I think that's a beautiful example of cutting through the clutter and creating something that's of tremendous service and value. That is going to be a legitimate strategy in these niches as we go forward as well.
And I think, ultimately trust matters too. And I hope that our listeners trust us to deliver quality content and to represent sponsors that we actually believe in. And I hope that, developing that trust is a whole other attribute that does not get measured by quantitative data.
Yes.
And I would be remiss, by the way, if I did not mention how excited we are to welcome our 3rd sponsor, Bernie Madoff Investments. Bernie Madoff Investments. I've had my money with them for nearly a quarter of a year now.
Oh, wait a minute. You better. There are going to be people who are going to start Googling Bernie Madoff. You're losing the millennials again.
No. I'm not going to lose the millennials again because I realize that I've been talking about the wrong Nipsey on this podcast. It's not Nipsey Russell I meant. It's Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey Hussle. And I think that's going to get the millennials streaming back to this show.
Well, we're closing in on the end of our program, which is amazing. This went so fast, but just a real hat tip to Steve for having the guts to publish an article like this. And as you said, the thing that gives Steve so much credibility is he is a data guy. He backs stuff up, and his article is very well illustrated with examples and charts, and so it just congratulations to Steve for taking the risk on what's really turned out to be quite a pillar post for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Do read it. If you don't just listen to us talk about it. Read it. Formulate your own opinions. It's as we've said all along, if eyeballs are your game, he's not wrong.
Yeah. And if I had to just leave one last comment, it's to be a critical thinker. And, don't just read one article or an article that I write or an article that Tom writes without really thinking about how does this apply to your business and your strategy. What Steve is proposing here is not going to work for every business. It's not going to support every business goal. It is one idea. He's kicking the thinking of content marketing in a different way here. Basically kind of supporting this notion of content shock as a strategy, which a lot of people haven't talked about. So be a critical thinker and consider how this supports your goal, either to sell advertising, which depends on views, or to establish yourself as a trusted thought leader. And with that, we thank once again our trusted and beloved sponsors, Affinio and BuzzSumo. Be sure to check them out. We thank you for listening today. We appreciate every one of you. And Tom and I both enjoy going out and meeting you and hearing how much you love our podcast. That means so much to us. And if you get a chance, why not stop by iTunes and leave us a review. Until next time, Mark Schaefer, Tom Webster, and we will see you on the Marketing Companion.